I would like to introduce Dr. Suhad Sonbul. Dr. Suhad is an assistant professor in the English Language Center at Al Qura University. She holds a PhD in applied linguistics from Nottingham University. She has published in several international journals, including Language Learning and Bilingualism, Language and Cognition. Her research interests include vocabulary teaching and learning, and psycholinguistics measures. Dr. Suhad, the floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Thank you so much, Dr. Nawal. Let me just share the screen. So is it clear now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So it gives me a great pleasure actually to be here with you today. I can see the numbers. I'm really glad to see teachers from different parts of Saudi here together, from the schools, from different universities. I hope it will be of interest to you. My talk today is going to be about enhancing language learning through extramural exposure. I'm going in this workshop to talk about three main parts. In the beginning, I'm going to talk about reasons why we think that extramural exposure is important. Then in the second part, I'm going to talk about the resources that are available, mainly online, for teachers in order to make this process possible. And finally, I'm going to talk about how to choose and modify resources in order to make sure that they are suitable for your learners at their level. I will talk for about 75 minutes, and we will have time for questions at the end. So if you have any questions, you can write them maybe at the end, not now, in the chat area, and they'll be able to respond to them. Another thing that I wanted to highlight is that here you can see this QR code to a worksheet. In the worksheet, you will find some useful resources, some of the books and references that I'm going to talk about, and also some websites that might be useful. I will also share the link to the file in the chat area. So you can find it in the chat area as well, or you can scan the QR code. Okay. So let's start with the first part. First of all, what is extramural exposure and why is it important for our learners? Now, you know that at the ELC here, we teach mainly students who have just joined the university. So they have finished their high school and they have just started their course in the university. Most of the time, I'm talking about myself, I teach the preparatory year students. So from my experience with the preparatory year students, it has been now almost 10 years teaching them, I noticed that the students, when they join college, we have different types of students. We have students who have lived abroad before, maybe because their family lived in England or in the US, and of course their language proficiency is high, and this is something that is out of question. But then for students who have spent the whole life here in Saudi, we have two types of students. Students who join the university with a good language proficiency level, they can understand, they read well. When you present them with something like a video, they will be able to get the idea from the video. On the other hand, there are students who are really, I would say, weak in terms of their language. They are trying hard, but it will take them some time. It's not easy for them. And they always ask me, teacher, what is the difference? Why am I like this? And why my friend is like that? What is the difference? We have been exposed to the same language. We went to public schools. There shouldn't be a difference. Why is my language not as good as my friend's language? And my answer would be that for most of the students that I have been teaching before, because I teach in the medical stream, so these are students who are the best of the best. They are very good students. They study hard. When they were in school, they would, memorize everything in the book. do all the grammatical exercises, learn maybe all the vocabulary that is needed for the exam, which is great, by the way. I'm not saying that this is not important, but my argument today is that this is not enough. You need something more, and this is actually what makes a difference. This is what makes you as a learner, a successful language learner, being able to communicate in the language freely. So this additional part is what we call extramural exposure. So what we mean by extramural exposure is exposure to the English language outside the classroom. It's self-learning whenever, and it's not learning really, it's like exposure. So you choose things that you really like as a learner, you expose yourself to the language in different modalities, in different levels, and believe me, that makes a huge difference. I still remember when I first taught at the preparatory year here in Qura, I had a student who has never lived abroad, and her language was amazing. And when I asked her, what did you do? How did you reach that level of language? She told me that since I was 12 or 13, I started watching and reading in English. Of course, I'm not saying that this is easy. It is difficult, it is challenging, but the results are 100% sure. It will happen. If you do it well, it will happen. So this is what we mean by extramural exposure. Surrounding yourself as a learner with the English language in different places and in different modalities. Now, why is that important? Extramural exposure is important for a number of reasons. Here I mentioned only a few of them. First of all, it will improve your reading skill, your reading ability. If you are reading a lot in a language, for sure, your reading speed will improve and also your reading comprehension. So it will make a big difference in your reading ability. And this is very important. We know at college level, you will be exposed to large number of texts, academic texts in English. If your reading skill is good, it means that you are saving yourself a lot of time and effort. The second thing is vocabulary. We know for sure from research, because vocabulary is my area actually. So from research in vocabulary, we know that extramural exposure is a big boost. And we have seen it a lot in countries in Northern Europe, like Iceland, for example, or other countries in the northern of Europe, that students, when they join school, even when they are 6 years old, they join the schools with a good English language repertoire of vocabulary. So they have a good repertoire, they know at least the basic vocabulary in the language, which makes it possible for them to communicate. And why is that? Because they found that in these countries, children are exposed to the language through TV, in their homes. They speak in English at home sometimes, so it makes a big difference. Pronunciation is also important, because when you are exposing yourself to the language, to native speakers speaking in movies, in songs, and so on, your pronunciation will surely improve because it comes with imitation. Then listening skill, of course, if you are listening in English, watching movies and series in English, your listening skill will improve, you will be able to understand, and things will get easier. Just to give you a story about myself, I remember myself when I started learning French a few years ago. I'm still a beginner, unfortunately, because I don't have time to expose myself to the language. And this tells you the importance of extramural exposure. So when I started learning French a few years ago, I remember myself listening to a text which was basic language. It wasn't difficult. It was at a basic level for beginners. And believe me, I couldn't understand a word, not even a single word. But when I listened again and again and again, things improved, and at least I started understanding. So it's very important that we understand extramural exposure is important for your listening skill. Speaking skill is also important, because your speaking will improve based on your listening. If you know how to pronounce the words well, if you expose yourself to the language and you know how native speakers communicate with each other, your speaking skill will improve as a consequence. Writing skill is also important. Reading and writing are very much related. So if you read a lot in a language, it means that your writing ability will improve. And we know that writing is a very important skill. We know that students here in Saudi suffer even after they finish college, that it's very difficult for them to write in English. And one reason might be lack of exposure. Grammar. We know, as I told you a few minutes ago, I have seen it a lot with my students, that they are excellent learners. They memorize the rule and they know how to apply it out of context. But the advantage of being exposed to the language in context is that you see how the grammatical rule is used. It means that you are improving how you use the grammatical rule in context. And this only happens with exposure. And finally, of course, reading in any language will improve your word knowledge. And if you are reading in a second language, it means that you are learning about the culture as well. It's very important. We know that language is not isolated. Language is part of the culture. So once you expose yourself to the language, it means that you are exposing yourself to the culture. You are becoming more, let me say, integrated with the culture of the language that you are learning. Okay, so I hope that by now you are convinced that extramural exposure is important. And as I said before, extramural exposure is exposure outside the classroom. So you might ask yourself as a teacher, and I ask myself as a teacher, but what is my role? If they are going to read, listen, and watch things outside the classroom, do I have something to do as a teacher? Well, yes, for sure, especially if you are teaching beginners. Students, when they start learning the language, they might find it really difficult to find the suitable resources. They don't know how to deal with the video that they are watching or the reading passage that they are reading. So it's your job as a teacher to give them the key, to allow them to enter this world of exposure, extramural exposure. Once they are given the key, then it becomes their job. Another thing that you can do, which is very interesting, is that I have seen it a lot with teachers at school level, that they give their students homeworks from the book, which is fine. Of course, they need to answer some grammatical exercises, they need to answer some vocabulary questions, which is fine. But is that enough? I hope that by now you are convinced that it's not enough. If you can maybe add some extramural exposure activities to your homeworks. So instead of asking them all the time to do grammatical exercises, ask them from time to time to watch a video and come back to class and report what they have seen. Ask them to read something short, maybe a passage or a number of passages, and they come back to you and they report what they have read or what they have understood. It becomes very interesting this way. First of all, the class will become less boring. And second of all, you are allowing them opportunities to practice the language in context. Okay, so now let's look at the resources. What are the resources that are available for me as a teacher to give the students the key that I just talked about? The resources that I'm going to talk about are divided into three main parts: reading, listening, and viewing or watching. For each one of them, I'm going to talk about the available resources, and I'm going to give you some hints on how to deal with it, at least in the beginning, until your students are used to the system. They know how to find the resource, they know how to deal with it, and they know how to find the next one. One thing that I want to stress before I start is that most of the resources that are available online are categorized according to the common European framework of reference. I'm sure that most of us are familiar with this framework, but just in case, I'm going just to review it quickly. So the common European framework of reference, or sometimes called CEFR, is unified framework for categorizing learners and also for categorizing resources. I'm sure you have heard before, or maybe you have seen it on some of the books, that these letters, A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, and C2. It's very important for you as a teacher to understand these different categories because you need them a lot when you choose your resources for extramural exposure. The A1 and the A2 are the basic levels. B1 and B2 are independent level. It means the learner has become independent. C1 and C2 is proficient. So from my experience, I can tell you that most of the students that join college are at the A1, A2 level. Most of them would be here. So if you are teaching in college, I would advise you to go to the A1 level. The A1 level, let me say, is the safest approach, unless, of course, you are teaching in an international school. In an international school, things might be different. But with public schools, I think the A1 level is the most appropriate. Of course, if you are teaching at college, you need to consider the proficiency level of your students, especially if they have finished their preparatory year and they have started their course in English. Their language proficiency level might have improved. Okay, so let's start with reading. What are the resources that are available for reading? There are hundreds of resources, so many websites, but today I'm going to talk mainly about two things. Number one is graded readers. I'm not sure if you are familiar with this idea. Graded readers are short reading books that are graded in the sense that they come at different levels. The A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2, the CEFR levels that we have just talked about. These books are amazing. And the ones that we are using here at Qura University are Oxford graded readers. Of course, you can find readers by different publishers, but this is what we are using here at Qura University. As you can see from the wide range, we have so many different books, so many different topics, so many different levels, genres. It's an amazing library that you can use for your students. In case you are interested in looking at some of these books, here is the link to the Oxford Graded Readers website. If you would like to scan it, then we are going to look at the website together. Okay, so let's look at the website together. Here we are. So you can see here that we have the Oxford University Press Graded Readers website. If you notice here, these are the levels that I just talked about: A1, A2, B1, B2, B1 plus also we have. So sometimes you have levels in the middle, B2 and C1. We don't have a C2. So according to the level of your students, you can click on one of them, on one of the levels. It will give you a list of all the available books. As I said, it's an amazing resource. You can find different things. And my advice usually to my students is to go to the website, explore the different topics and the different titles that are there, and choose something that is of interest. One very important point about graded readers is that they should be interesting to the students. This is the main point. And this is why we have so many different titles. It's not healthy for you as a teacher to choose the title for them. No, let them choose the title that they like based on their preference, and it will make a big difference in their language if they are consistent. Of course, it will not come from reading the first book only or the second book only. It will take time as a learner, you need to be consistent, and truly at the end, your reading will improve. Okay, so it seems that this website is a little bit slow, but you get the idea. Basically, you need to choose the level and then you look at the books. Now, of course, something that you need to keep in mind is that these books are not free, of course. So they are 30 to 50 riyals. They are available in different places like Jarir, for example. So your students, if they are interested, they can go there and choose the titles that they like. In my opinion, even if as a learner, I'm going to pay some money for these books, it's worth the investment. It will make a big difference in your language. Okay, now let's look at one sample of a graded reader. Here we have one sample, which comes from the Oxford Library. Wonderful Water. Okay, so this is the title of the book. Here you can see the table of content, and here you can see the first page or the introduction. Now, what I want you to do quickly, I will give you 1 minute. I want you to look through the book and the pages and tell me, in your opinion as a teacher, why you think that this reader is suitable for the level of the students. How do we know? What are the advantages, let me say, of graded readers? I'll give you 1 minute. Excellent. The cover is appealing. Very interesting. Thank you so much, Ms. Aman. The colors and the pictures, yes. What else? Pictures, yes, that's very true. There's a dictionary at the end of the book, and the language is very simple, short, very interesting, yes. Easy words, easy language. Familiar words at the student's level. The topics are relevant, interesting, yes, I agree. Attractive title, words with pictures, easy language. Yes, I agree with all of what you have seen, but let's look at all of these advantages in detail. Number one, you will notice that here we have number 3. Did you see number 3 here at the cover? Number 3 here refers to the level. The graded readers, they have different levels, as I told you, according to the proficiency level of the learner. So we have level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. As we go up, the levels become more difficult. So if you are teaching students in schools, I would advise them maybe to read the level 1. Maybe when they join college and the language is a little bit improved, they can move up to level 2 or level 3 or level 4. So this is a very important feature of readers that you need to keep in mind, and you need to tell your students about. When they choose the book, they need to look at the level carefully. I have seen it before with my students. I have seen it a lot with my students before, that they buy a book without looking at the level, and then they are surprised that it's level 6. So this is very important. The level is very important. Another important feature is length, as some of you have said. The reader is only 22 pages. The reader is only 22 pages, so it's very short. And you can read it as a learner maybe in a few hours. So this is, again, a very important advantage. It means that your life is going to be easier. It's not complicated. It's not long. It's not boring. Another feature that you need to keep in mind is the activities at the end of the book. We have activities, we have projects, We have picture dictionary, as some of you have said. All of these activities actually enhance learning. As a learner, as I'm reading, I might not notice a new word, but if it's included in the dictionary at the end of the reader, this will attract my attention to the word and I will learn it. Another thing is pictures, as you said. You can see in the introduction here that we have fewer words and more pictures. For beginners, this is a very important advantage. And finally, audio. This is very important. Most of these books by Oxford, they have a CD that accompanies the reader, which means that as a learner, I can read and listen at the same time. Now you might ask me, why is this important? I'm going to talk from the point of view of vocabulary research. From the point of view of vocabulary learning, when you are reading a text and listening at the same time, this means that you are learning more words. Reading plus listening is an advantage to reading only. So this is very important. Make sure that your students understand they need to listen and read at the same time. This will improve their listening ability, their reading ability, their vocabulary knowledge. This will improve their proficiency in so many different aspects. So looking now at the readers, I hope that you are convinced it's a very great tool in the hands of the teacher. You can maybe in your class bring 1 or 2 examples and then keep it open to the students. If they know the basics of the idea, they can go select the topic that they like, and this will improve their language. By the way, one thing that might help beginners, especially beginners, just like myself when I started learning French, is reading again. Reading again. So you can tell your students, if you think that the reader was so difficult, you couldn't understand many of the details the first time you read it, that's fine. Read it again. Read it a 3rd time, a 4th time. In vocabulary research, they talk about repeated reading. Repeated reading is a sure way to, first of all, understand the text that you are reading, and second of all, improve your learning outcomes. Whatever you are going to learn from the book is going to improve if you read it again and again and again. And by the way, when we talk about repeated reading, we will also in a minute talk about repeated listening and repeated viewing. As a beginner, I always tell my students, read again and again and again, listen again and again and again, watch more than once. The same episode, if you watch it more than once, it will make a difference. And now comes a story to my mind. I remember that some of my friends learn Turkish, for example, and I'm sure you have seen students like that and friends like that. They learn Turkish or they learn Korean only from exposure. Nobody taught them at school. And their language is excellent. They can understand the language very well. Why? Because they listen again and again and again, and they try to understand what is being said. Now, the graded readers is a great choice. And we talked about the advantages of them. Another option that is free is websites for extensive reading. One amazing website is the Extensive Reading Foundation. I have seen actually articles in which they recommend using the Extensive Reading Foundation. We are going to look at the website in a minute, so you can scan the QR code if you like. One big advantage of the Extensive Reading Foundation website is that all the resources there are free. They are free. So you don't need to pay. It's not like graded readers. It's all free. The students can access reading passages at their level and read, understand, and learn. So let's look at the website. This is the website, the Extensive Reading Foundation. So you can see that it's actually a collection of websites 3 websites in one. Like I remember the ercentral.com was a separate website, but now it's included under the Extensive Reading Foundation. So in all of these websites, you will find interesting articles, interesting stories that you can use with students at their level. But I'm going to focus now at the freegradedreaders.com. This one, the first website. So you can see here that, again, as I said before, the levels are divided according to the CEFR. A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. Again, if you are teaching beginners, choose the A1 level. So let's look at the A1 level. At the A1 level, it's very interesting. You have some graded readers that are available for free. And by the way, this website is not breaching copyright. This website uses graded readers that were made freely available by the publisher. So this is something that we need to keep in mind. So all of those graded readers are very interesting. Why? Because their language is basic. You can use the reader with your students who are maybe at school level or even first year university college, and they will understand. It's a story, so they will find it interesting, and it will give them some background knowledge on the culture. So this is the A1 level. If we move on to the A2 level, you can see that the level is a little bit higher. Again, we have graded readers that are freely available, but at a higher level. Okay. Also, if you are interested in shorter texts, shorter passages, here we have a tab for shorter ER. Again, according to the level, we have for kids, for teens, for adults. This is the British Council, and we are going to talk about it in a minute. We have stories, shorter passages, so many things that you can use with your students. So I would advise you as a teacher, look at the website, explore it on your own time, see the tabs or the areas that are suitable for your students' level, and make sure that from the beginning of the semester, they know that this resource is available. They can go and they can check, they can download books and they can read them. Okay, so this is very important. Let me give you one example. So one example at the A1 level is this graded reader, Fire on the Mountain. I'm going to look at this book as an example. Okay, so this book is about a boy from Indonesia who has moved from his village to a city. It's a very short story, and believe me, and in a minute I'm going to show you the first page. The language is super easy. If you start using it with your students, I think they will get interested, and they will know that there are resources that are suitable for their level. Reading doesn't mean difficult. Reading can be at their level and easy at the same time. This link here, this QR code, is to the PDF to the story. So you can download it on your own device. So you can see from the table of contents that the story is very short, only 21 pages. The language is easy, goes, town, friends, home, things like that. So it is super easy. Let's look at the first page. This is the first page of the story. So Saging is the name of the boy, the hero of the story. loses his home. So if you look here at this page, how do you think you can start introducing the story to your students? Usually, when we start teaching reading, what is the first thing that we need to look at in order to get a general idea of the passage or the story we are reading? The pictures, yes, especially with beginners. The picture can speak better than 100 words. Look at the picture. Looking at the picture, where do you think this story took place? In a farm. So even if you don't understand the word farm, you will be able to understand it from the picture. So this is very important. I always tell my students that whenever you see a reading passage, be it a story, a book, or a text, look at the pictures and also look at the title. If you understand the title and the picture, it means that you have got most of the story. Then, if you look at the 3 paragraphs in this page, very easy language. You can see that the language is super easy. Maybe as a student, especially if I am a beginner, it might be difficult for me to understand some words. Like I remember I gave a workshop to students in middle school, and they told me that island, they don't know the word island. Java, of course, is the name of the island, but they don't know it, and farmers. This is very important from the beginning of the semester. Once you start this extramural exposure practice, tell your students that you don't need to understand each and every word. You are reading for pleasure. So if you understand most of the text, if you have got the gist, especially if you are reading for pleasure, I'm not talking about reading for an exam. Reading for an exam is a different story, and we are going to talk about it in a minute. But if you are reading for pleasure, don't worry about the words. Don't carry a dictionary with you all the time you are reading. In the beginning, you might find it interesting and useful, but as time goes, you might find it boring. So I always tell my students, look at the pictures, look at the title, read it quickly for enjoyment, and don't worry about the difficult words. Now, is that enough? No. The last step after looking at the pictures and getting the gist, reading the passage and getting a general idea of the story, as a student or as a teacher, if you are exposing them to this extramural exposure idea, they need to answer some questions. If you are teaching, give them some questions that you have prepared. But if the student is reading on his or her own, what you can do is, as a student, after you finish reading the chapter or the book, ask yourself, what did I understand? I always tell my students that it's not a problem if you go to your mother and tell her, you know, I read this story today. It talks about a boy from Indonesia and he did this and this and that. This again will enhance your learning. In the beginning, you might find it difficult as a learner to retell the story in English, which is fine. Tell it in Arabic. The main point is that as a learner, I want to make sure that I understood the story. There is no point if you are reading without comprehension. Comprehension is important. I would say the basic level is to tell it in Arabic. Retell the story in Arabic to your sister, to your brother, or maybe to your mother or father. That's enough. It shows that you have understood, that you have learned something from there. All the websites are available on the link that I sent you in the beginning of the session. Also at the end, inshallah, I'm going to send it again in the chat area. Okay, now we are done with reading. This was a huge part of the presentation because we understand that reading is very important. Now let's move on to listening. What resources are available online for listening? Of course, we have so many, but today I want to talk about one of them only, which is the British Council. I'm not sure if you are familiar with this website, but it's an amazing I don't know what's happening. Sorry, let me just share it again. Okay, yes. So I was talking about this website by the British Council. It's an amazing resource. You can see that we have different tabs for different skills. Grammar, vocabulary, business English, even if you are looking for ESP practice, and general English. So it's an amazing resource for different skills. But today I want to focus on the listening practice on this website. Why listening especially? Because on other websites, you might find reading practice, as we have seen a few minutes ago. But listening practice at a good quality is rare online. And this website is an example for a good resource for excellent listening practice. It's British Council. You can scan the QR code here. It will take you to the website. And I'm going now to look at it with you together. Okay, so let's look at the website. Okay, so let's look at the website. The British Council. Let me share the link with you here. Of course, you can use so many different resources. I'm telling you what, in my opinion, are the best resources. You might find more resources, you might find more websites, but these are, in my opinion, the best. Okay, so again, what you can notice here is that we have different levels: A1, A2, B1, B2, and C1. Okay, so let's look at the A1 level, which is mostly our students in schools and at the first university level. This is the link to the website, to the British Council website. Okay, so once you click on A1, you can find a number of listening exercises. And it's not only listening. I'm going to show you in a minute. Each practice has a number of activities. So let's look at one of them. I chose this one, booking a table. What I really like about the listening practice in this website is the different stages. It's not only listening, it's listening in stages. First of all, you have preparation. So you need to answer some questions about time, because this listening practice is related to time. So this is preparation before you listen. Then you have the listening section. And as I said before, you can listen so many times. If you are a beginner, listen 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 times. There is no problem. Listen more and more and more until you understand. It's not a problem at all. An additional advantage of this website is the transcript. I know that some teachers don't like the idea of the transcript. They think that the listening exercise becomes reading if the transcript is there. But believe me, from my experience, with beginners especially, if the transcript is there, it makes things easier. They are reassured that even if I don't understand the listening, there is another resource that can help me. And always remember what I said in the beginning. Research shows that reading plus listening is better than reading alone or listening alone. So there is no harm. Tell them that in the beginning, or maybe after 2, 3, 4 times of listening, look at the transcript and try to match. It's not a problem at all. It's an advantage in my opinion. Then we have task 1. After you listen, you answer some questions. Task 2, you put the questions in order. And finally, you have a discussion. So if you would like to use this kind of exercise in your classes, you can start with the pre-listening activity, listen and read the transcript, and then do the exercises, and finally discuss the topic with the students. What I really like about this website is that it's integrated. So it's reading because the transcript is there. It's of course listening because this is the main point of the exercise. And also it is speaking because at the end you will need to discuss. So this is a good advantage of the website. Again, the website is an amazing resource. Today, I only looked at listening, but believe me, there are so many other things that you can do here, including vocabulary, grammar, different skills like writing, speaking, reading, and all of these resources are categorized according to the CEFR. So use it, again, explore it, and ask your students to explore it, maybe in the beginning of the semester with you, and then as you go along the semester, practice again and again, maybe from time to time. But always remember that, yes, you as a teacher, you are giving the students the key, but they should enter. You cannot take them step by step to the end. You can give them the steps in the beginning, but they need to have the motivation inside to improve their language. How can that come? In my opinion, maybe you can tell them the story that I just told you about. The story of a student who joins college with a very good scores in English, but her language proficiency is not that good. And that the only solution to that problem is exposure. You read, you listen, and you watch. Okay, so let's go back to the presentation. So we looked at the different stages together, and this applies to all the other listening exercises there, and the questions that are available on the website. So this is only one example. Look at the other ones and explore the website on your own. Okay, now finally viewing. Most of the research, by the way, in the 1990s, 2000s, was about reading and listening. Since I would say 2010, or even a little bit later, we started to see research on learning languages from viewing. I'm sure you agree with me, and we have seen it a lot from our friends, for example, that students or learners who watch a lot in English, who watch English movies, who watch episodes in another language, they will learn the language. The good news is that research now confirms that this is effective. It improves your listening ability, it improves your vocabulary knowledge, and it improves your grammatical knowledge. It's amazing in every sense. And what I really like about the viewing aspect of extramural exposure is that students usually like it. If you ask a student to read a book, he will say, oh, teacher, I don't like reading. I don't even read in Arabic in order to read in English. Ask them to listen. Maybe they will do it. Maybe they will be interested. But if you ask them to watch a movie, and if they really like it, they will do it. And believe me, they will learn. But there are a number of things or features that you need to keep in mind in order to maximize the benefit from viewing. Now, you might ask me, what kind of viewing are you talking about? Very serious viewing, viewing of, news, things like that, academic reportings? No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about viewing for pleasure. So if you are teaching students at school level, middle school, or even high school, we have Disney. All of those movies by Disney, I'm sure your students will be interested in. Each student, if you ask her or him, he will have something that he's interested in. As I said, they need to select what they are interested in, listen again and again and again, and surely their language will be improved. This is one thing, and usually for, let's say, teenagers, children, although even my students at college level, by the way, they like Disney movies. But what if you are a little bit older in age? We have so many other resources. We have movies. We have, series. We have documentaries. We have shows like talk shows. So many things that you can watch online. The key here is that as a learner, find the thing that you like. If you find what you like, you watch it again and again and again. Maybe you watch it in a specific area again and again. Believe me, your language will improve. And by the way, in the beginning, I talked about repeated reading and repeated listening. Here, I'm going also to talk about repeated viewing. Another thing that is really interesting, a term that you might have heard before, which is narrow viewing. Narrow viewing, it means viewing in a specific area. So if you are, for example, interested in documentaries about animals, you watch 10 episodes of that program. You are interested in Friends, the TV show, the series, watch maybe the whole series. You are interested in Oprah Winfrey, watch Oprah Winfrey. What is really interesting about narrow viewing in one area, is that you will learn from your experience. So when you do narrow viewing in one area, you will learn vocabulary, okay, and you will practice the vocabulary along the lines. Like imagine if you are watching Friends, okay, and Friends, the language should be similar across the episodes. So you will learn from the repeated language across the episodes. Okay, so repeated viewing and narrow viewing. Some of you were asking, what shall we do with the subtitles? Should the subtitles be in English or in Arabic? Which one, according to research, is more relevant or more beneficial to our learners? According to research, it's more beneficial for your learners to watch the movie and read the subtitles in English. Please tell your students, don't watch the translation in Arabic. Why is that? Again, if we go back to the idea that we talked about in the beginning, reading plus listening, more than one modality. So yes, you are listening, but at the same time, you need to read. So if you read the subtitles, it means you are learning the language. You are learning vocabulary. Now, you might ask me, do all the videos have subtitles? No, not all of them do. But if you go to YouTube, there is this link here, the CC, closed caption, which is available for most of things in English. And once you click it, you will see the subtitles there. Okay, so tell your students, watch with English subtitles, and this is a sure way to improve your language. Okay. Of course, YouTube is an amazing resource, but one thing that you might need to keep in mind is that whatever you select, whatever you provide with your students should be culturally appropriate. Don't provide them with any resource that might not be appropriate to the culture. You need to give them advice in this area as well, and we are going to talk about it in a minute. Okay. Now let's look at the last section of this presentation. How to choose and modify the resources. So in the beginning, we talked about the importance of extramural exposure. Then we talked about reading, listening, and viewing the different resources that are available. And finally, now we are going to talk about how to choose and modify the resources. What things you should do as a teacher to make sure that this resource is suitable for the learners. 3 things, in my opinion, are important. Number 1, you want to make sure that whatever the student selects is interesting to her. She likes it. She would like to read it or view it or listen to it. Otherwise, it will not be beneficial. The second point is that it should be at a suitable level. It shouldn't be very difficult. You should try yourself to choose a text that is suitable for the level of the student, or maybe modify it slightly to make it suitable. Finally, we need to make sure that the whatever you are choosing is, as I said before, culturally appropriate. Is it appropriate for the culture, or is it something that is not suitable for the culture? And this is, by the way, is very important, especially when you deal with teenagers. When you teach students in middle school, you need to be very careful when you provide them with resources or with links. It's your job as a teacher to make sure that it's appropriate, that it will not maybe provoke the parents. It is something in English, but suitable for the culture. Okay. Now, what I'm going to talk about in the last part of the session is suitable level. How can you make sure that the level of the reader or the movie or the listening practice is suitable for the level of the students? Of course, there are so many ways. There are a number of websites maybe that you can use for that purpose. And we also, in the beginning, we talked about the levels, the CEFR, A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. But what I want to focus at the end of the session is vocabulary level. Believe me, if you can control for the vocabulary in the text that the students are reading or the text that they are listening to, it means that you will improve their comprehension. It will make it suitable for their level. So this is what I'm going to talk about. Suitable for the level when we talk about lexical coverage. So this is a very important term that you need to understand as a teacher when you choose or select a resource for your students. What do we mean by lexical coverage? Lexical coverage is how many words I know in the text, how many words I covered in the text, how many words I don't have a problem with in the text. According to recent research, in reading, you need, if you want to understand the text fully, you need to understand 98% of the words. And you know what that means? It means only one new word in 50. If it's more than that, it means that the reading might be too difficult for the learners and they might not understand the details. Then, listening comprehension. According to research, for listening comprehension, you need coverage of 95% of the words only. 95%. And why is that? If you noticed, with reading, it's 98%, but with listening, it's 95%. Because with listening, you can actually use other resources. You can listen to the voice of the speaker. Is he asking a question or is he making a statement? All of those clues can make it easier to understand. And that's why with listening, we can go down to 95%. Now, let me give you an example in order to show you what we mean by one unknown word in 50 and one unknown word in 20. I will just focus on reading one unknown word in 50. So imagine there is this reading passage. I'll give you 1 minute to read it. Okay, so these gaps, if you can see in the middle of the passage, are, or they represent what the student doesn't know. So imagine that the student understands the word Irish, USA, typhoid, way, carrier, all of the words are okay with the student except those 5. In that case, we say that the lexical coverage is 90. And if you have read it, you will notice that it's difficult to understand. It's very difficult for a learner to understand a passage when he only knows 90% of the words in the text. It means 10 words not known, 10% not known. Okay, so let's go a little bit higher. At a 95%, you only have 3 words unknown in 50. Is that better? Of course. Is it perfect? No. According to research, if you want to achieve excellent understanding, you need to know 98%. Okay, so let's go a little bit higher. At 98%, if you have a text of 50 words, it means you don't know only one of them. According to research, this is okay. It means that as a teacher, I can make sure that my learners are okay with this reading passage and they understand the gist. They don't need to check a dictionary. I don't need to modify it. Now, of course, if you can reach 100%, that would be perfect. But we know, teachers, we know that it's not always possible. Most of the time, this is not possible. So aiming at 98% is, I would say, an ideal solution. Now you might ask me, how can I know? How do I know how many words my students know and how many words they don't know? And then accordingly, I choose a text that is suitable for their level. The way we usually do this, especially when we do research studies and we want to make sure that the reading is suitable for the level of the participants, we do it in 3 ways. Number 1, we measure the vocabulary size, and I'm going to tell you in a minute how to do that. The second step is to analyze the text. And finally, you need to match the vocabulary size with the text. So let's talk about them one by one, and let's see how the steps work. First of all, measuring vocabulary size. By the way, when we talk about vocabulary size, we are talking about how many words a learner knows in English. There are different tests that are available that you can use with your students. It can give you an estimate of their vocabulary size in English. The one that is the most updated is the Web et al. 2017. You can see that we have different links to the test here. You can see it in Google Form, or you can see it on a website. And here is the paper and pencil test. If you scan the QR codes, it will give you access to the different forms of the test. What is really interesting about this test, the BLT, is that it measures the most frequent 5,000 word families in English. So it tells you how many words do you know in English, how many 5,000 words out of 5,000. We have 5 levels, and at each level we have 30 words tested. Okay, let me give you an example. I'm going to talk about the level that when you should use this test. So here is an example from the test. You can see here that we have a table, game, island, mouth, movie, song, and yard. And what you need to do as a learner, you need to match one definition with one word. So land with water all around it is, of course, island. Part of your body used for eating and talking is mouth. Piece of music is song. So it's a matching exercise. I'm going to talk about giving it to beginners. Thank you for your question. So as you can see here, all you need to do is to match. And there are extra words like game, movie, and yard. For those, you don't need to find matches. They are used only to reduce guessing. Now, it's very interesting. Thank you so much for your questions and for your feedback. Can I use this test with teenagers who have just maybe started learning English, let me say, seriously? No, no. This type of test, in my opinion, is more suitable for college level students. Usually with my students, I give it to them, if I have time, I give it to them the first week of the semester. It gives me a rough idea of their proficiency and of their vocabulary knowledge, which means that as a teacher, I am in control. I know which passages might be suitable for them and which passages might not be suitable for them. The test is long. It's about, I think, 7 pages. And if you want to give it to your college students, it might take about the whole test. It might take 1 hour or more. But by the way, you don't need to give the students all the levels. If we know for sure that most of our students, maybe they know the 1,000, 2,000 levels, then we don't need to go up to the 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 words. You only give them the 1,000 and the 2,000, and that's enough. It will give you a rough idea of their proficiency at this level. So what I really like about the test is that it is divided into levels, and you can choose the levels according to what is suitable for your students. You don't need to administer the whole test. Okay? So after your students have taken the test, what is the outcome? You will get a score. For each level, we said we have 5 levels. For each level, you will get a score out of 30. Okay? So imagine that at the 1000 level, they scored 27 out of 30. At the 2000 level, they scored 20 out of 30. 3000, 15 out of 30, and 4000, 10 out of 30. Let's imagine that I stopped here. I didn't give them the 5000 level. And you will notice, by the way, that the score will go down as the levels go up. It makes sense because according to research, we know the most frequent words in the language and we know fewer words of the least frequent. Now, how can I decide if my students know that level or have mastered that level? Usually, the cutoff score is 26. So if your students score 26 out of 30, you can be confident that they know that level. So here, looking at the scores of your students in your group, we know that they have mastered the 1K level, but not the 2K, not the 3K, and not the 4K. What does that mean? It means that when you give them a reading passage, especially in the exam, or even when you are reading for understanding and comprehension in the class, you need to make sure that 98% of the words, remember the 98 figure? 98% of the words should come from the 1000 level. If it's less than that, then it means that the reading passage is too difficult for the learners. Now, of course, you might tell me, but reading is not only about vocabulary. That's true. Reading is also about grammar. Sometimes the vocabulary might be suitable for the level, but the grammar might be too difficult. Maybe using the passive voice a lot. But as I said, my focus today is on vocabulary. And from my experience, if you control for the vocabulary, you are solving most of the issues in the reading text. Okay, so now this is the first step done. We have measured the vocabulary size and we know how many words our students know in English. We know that they have mastered the 1000 words in English. Now, let's analyze the text. Here is the text that I want to use with my students. And if you scan the QR code, you can have a copy of the text. Okay? This text, by the way, comes from a book that we teach at Qura University. I think it was A1 level. So let's see if that kind of text is suitable for our students. How can we do that? I'm going to copy the text. Okay, let's copy the text. And then I'm going to open this website. It's called LexTutor. And one feature on LexTutor is the vocab profiler. So you can scan it. Thank you so much. Somebody shared it on the chat area. Thank you so much. So this website is amazing, by the way. It has so many different tools that you can use with your students. But today, I'm going to focus only on the vocab profiler. So I copied the text. This is the vocab profiler. I'm going to choose this one. There are so many options, but I'm going to choose this one, BNC COCA 25. BNC COCA 25. This is, if you like, the most updated. We have copied, if you remember, the text. Here we have this area. We paste it. We want to make sure that if we have compounds, they break them apart. They don't consider them difficult, like birthday. If we have names, you want to make sure that you include them here so that they are not included in the difficulty level. usually when we analyze the coverage of the text, we don't consider names. Proper names should be known because they are in capital. So now what we do, we click on submit window, this one, the yellow button. Okay, so let's click it and let's see what we will get. This is what you will get. It will tell you how many words in the text are at the K1 level, how many words in the text are at the K2 level, and so on. So 1,000 words, 2,000 words, 3,000 words. K here, by the way, stands for 1,000. Okay, so if you look at the analysis here, 95% of the words are at the K1 level, which is not bad. It means that the reading passage is kind of suitable for the learners. But if you remember, we said the ideal figure is 98. In order to reach 98, there are 5 difficult words here that we need to deal with. Let's go down and see the words in green. Usually they use color coding. So let's look at the words in green. We have taxi, guest, tourists, again guest and hotel, account, and supper. Supper is very difficult, even higher than 3,000. So now it becomes your decision as a teacher. Imagine that you are teaching reading or you want to modify a text in order to use it with your students for extramural exposure in class, at least to introduce them to the idea of extramural exposure. What can you do with the text? You have a number of options that you can work with. So based on the results of the vocabulary test and based on the results of the analysis, we know that we have 5 or maybe 6 words that need to be dealt with. What can we do with those words? We have 3 options. Either pre-teach the unknown vocabulary. So before you start the reading activity, teach the vocabulary before you start. Or another option, replace the unknown vocabulary with easier synonyms. Like, for example, we have the word supper. You can replace supper with dinner, which is much easier. And finally, if you find that the level of the text is far too difficult to control, change the text. Then you know for sure that this text is not suitable for the student's level. By the way, this is if you want the academic way of controlling for lexical coverage in reading and listening texts. But as a teacher, from my experience, especially when you teach at schools and it's difficult to administer the vocabulary test to your students, you will develop your sense as a teacher if this is suitable or this is not suitable. Maybe some words are easy for the students and other words are difficult. So if you cannot use the vocabulary test with your students, I would say follow your intuition as a teacher. And if you are not 100% sure, ask a colleague. Your intuition as a teacher says a lot about the level of the text. Okay? So this is the end. Thank you so much. Just to recap, we talked today about extramural exposure, the importance of extramural exposure and how we can apply it in our classroom. I hope that you will we will finish this session with an important message. Surround your students with English. It's not enough that we are teaching them grammatical rules and vocabulary items. You need to help them to understand the importance of extramural exposure. You need to give them the key to this huge world of resources, and then it will become their decision and their future. Is it easy? I know that most of you now are thinking. Suhad is talking about extramural exposure. The world is not as easy as that. There are so many things that we need to do as teachers in our classes, whether at school level or at college level. The students might not be motivated. I'm not saying it's easy. It is difficult. And you might take some time to convince your students that extramural exposure is important. But believe me, it is worth the effort. Vocabulary, in general, language learning is not an easy task. We know that it takes a lot of time and effort. And it's your job as a teacher to help your learners to go to the top. It will take time, it will take effort, but if you are willing to put some effort into this area, believe me, the outcomes will be amazing. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, please feel free to write them in the chat area, and I will answer them as much as I can. Let me just share the resources with you. Here is the link again in case you missed it. Thank you so much. Thank you for your interest. Yes, I just shared the link with you. Yes, I'm done. If you have any questions, you can ask. Sure. Sure, Mr. Salman, go ahead. As for the slides, maybe you can ask the organizers at the end. And even the recording, you can ask the organizers at the end. Thank you so much, Mr. Salman, for the question. When I administer the vocabulary test with my students at college level, preparatory year, usually they haven't even mastered the 1000 level, unfortunately. So some of them have mastered the 1000 level. Some of them haven't even mastered the 1000 level. At the 2000 level, most of them, they haven't reached that level. And it's sad. It shows that our learners are spending now maybe more than 10 years in school learning English, but they finish school with a very small vocabulary size. It means that they are suffering when they are reading, they are suffering when they are listening, and they are suffering when they are viewing. In my opinion, the only solution is exposure. They need to understand that what they are getting in school is excellent, is important, but is not enough. I understand. It's not easy to accommodate all of these things and resources that I talked about today in the class. And this is why I said, give them the key. In the beginning of the semester, tell them that extramural exposure is important, that it will make a big difference in their level. Give them a few examples, maybe in the beginning of the semester, maybe if you have some time in the middle of the semester, but then tell them it's your responsibility. I can help you as a teacher if you need help, but at the end, it's a decision that you need to make, and it will make a great difference in your future. In the beginning of the day, Dr. Amir said that English language is a very important skill, and we know that companies will first look at your language. If your language is good, they will recruit you. If not, then you are not recruited. This means that whatever you are doing when you are at school level will pay off when you finish college. As for the recording, you can ask the organizers at the end, inshallah. I'm sure they can help you. Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much, Mr. I can't read the name well. It's true that we are teaching students English in order to pass the exam. I'm talking about myself as well. Most of the time when we teach English, whether at school or at college level, we want to prepare them for the exam, we want them to pass the exam, and that's it. Which is a great, by the way, a great aim. It's not bad. We know that we need to prepare our students for the exam. But my argument today is that this is not enough. If the student wants to improve her or his language, then he needs to work hard. And part of this hard work is the exposure that he or she surrounds himself with. So it's not your job as a teacher to surround them with English all the time. It's your job to give them the key, and then the world is open for them. Thank you so much for the question, Mr. Saad. They are very effective graded readers, and we have research, especially in the area of vocabulary, showing that graded readers can improve your vocabulary knowledge. Now, I understand that you might think, well, students, especially here in Saudi, they don't like reading. They don't even read in Arabic, not even talking about reading in English. But I think that it's your job as a teacher to motivate them, especially for reading, because usually they are motivated to watch movies, to view things in English. That might not be a big problem, but reading is an issue for most of the Saudi students. Motivate them, maybe give them incentives, give them grades if they have read something online and they came back to you and reported what they have understood. I think here you need to work harder in order to build their, if you want, habit of reading. It's not easy, but I think as a teacher, you can help. That's true. Motivation is a very important factor here. But believe me, when we talk about motivation, it's very important for us to understand that the motivation that should come from inside. The true motivation should come from inside. So it shouldn't come from the exam. It shouldn't come from grades. It should come from the exam. And if you ask me, I would say, let me just go to the beginning of the presentation. Yes, here we are. So if you ask me, I would say that this idea of students joining college with a good level of English simply because of being exposed to the language a lot, believe me, this can put them in the mood for more exposure to English. It should come from inside. I can help to enhance the motivation of the students, but it needs to come from inside.
Dr. Suhad, we have a question here from Miss Dina. She's asking, what is the best to teach letters separate or capital and small letters together?
Thank you so much for the question. Very interesting. To tell you the truth, this is not my area, and I haven't looked at research in this area before. But I will tell you my intuition as a teacher, which is not surely the right answer. My intuition is that it's better to teach maybe one of them before the other, but not together. Why I'm saying this, because even when we teach vocabulary, we have a norm here in Saudi that we teach opposites together. So we teach hot with cold. We teach high with low, long with short. And according to research, when you teach two things that are too similar together, it makes it more difficult to learn. But if you teach me one word and give me time to practice it before I learn the opposite, it means that the first word is established before I go to the next one. Now,
taking this idea to teaching letters, I would say that it's better to start teaching either the capital or small in the beginning, practice it a lot with the students until they get used to the idea and they know how to write it well, in which direction. And then after that, you teach the other form of the letter. Teaching things together will get the learner confused. I hope this answers your question.
We have another question. I'm not sure, I can't read the name, but the question says, in our school books, the grammar explanation, let me read it from here. The grammar explanation starts in grade 6. I don't want them to remember the rules and don't want to explain it to them because it's not useful. I want them to be exposed to it. But how can, I think she means, how can we explain to them the past tense and verb changes? Any ideas?
Thank you so much. As I said in the beginning, my approach to learning a language is that we need both. There is no way that we expose our learners to English all the time and we deprive them from grammatical rules and vocabulary items. They go together, and we need to think about it all the time like this. They are complementary. So I wouldn't ignore the grammatical rules in the book. No, I would explain them very well. And then as a homework, I would give my students a number of maybe stories online, videos online, which talk about stories in the past, which means that they will be exposed to the past tense in context. So they have learned the rule, and now they can see how it's applied in context. I think it makes a big difference when two things happen together. And by the way, when we talk about extramural exposure versus explicit teaching, let me say, I would say that if you are teaching grade 1 and grade 2, maybe you should depend more on extramural exposure because the students are not cognitively advanced to understand all the grammatical rules. But once maybe students reach 12, 14, they are cognitively aware and they can study rules in a better way, then you can maybe focus more on grammatical rules. And this is something that I really hope will happen in the future in schools in Saudi. As I said in the beginning, countries in the northern of Europe, like Denmark, like Iceland, so many countries, the students only from extramural exposure, from games, from reading, from listening, from viewing in English, they develop their language a lot. So by the time they are exposed to grammatical rules, they have the base. It's easy for them to understand the story if you tell them a story. But if you start with the rules and the students are still not cognitively aware, they are at grade 1 or grade 2, I think it would be difficult. So I hope that in the future, things will change, at least for very young learners. I think extramural exposure is enough, but then we can add more of explicit teaching as the student gets older. Thank you so much.
We have some questions here, Dr. Suhad. Let me just check here. We have a question from, just a minute. From Miss Noura. She says for elementary level, they should be exposed to like more listening material. Is this true?
Yes, I think because when you start learning English, especially at a very young age, grade 1 or grade 2 or grade 3, it might be difficult for you to read even in Arabic. They take some time in order to master the reading skill, even in the first language. So when they start reading in English, of course, it will be difficult in the beginning. It will take them maybe a few years to learn all the letters, all the shapes. So I agree. When you are a very young learner, exposure through viewing and listening can be enough. But then as you get older and your reading ability, your recognition of letters improves, then you can be exposed to reading. I totally agree. I think it's very important that if you are teaching young learners, that you understand that it's a very special case. It's not like any other teaching. You need to surround them with the language all the time. You need to make sure that it's very interesting. I have seen it a lot, by the way, with my students at college level. When they join college and they don't have motivation to learn the language, you know what they tell me when I ask them? They tell me, teacher, we always knew that English is important, but nobody gave us the key. Nobody made it interesting. We were sitting there in the class, taking exams, maybe getting high grades in the exams, but deep inside, we know that our language is not improving. So again and again, it's our job as teachers to give the students the keys, to open the doors for them, and then it becomes their choice. As I said, you cannot spoon feed them all the time. You can give them the key in the beginning, but then it's their job to take full responsibility of their learning and to get exposed to the language more and more and more. Thank you so much.
Okay, we have a question from Mr. Majid. He said, is it true that ESP focuses on oral skills more than reading and writing skills?
Thank you so much for the question. Actually, ESP is the area where the ELC is very well known. No, I have been teaching ESP for a number of years now, the medical stream, and they don't agree that it focuses only on the oral skills. Writing and reading is also very important. Imagine if you are a doctor who have finished his degree in college, and now you're going to work in a hospital. Of course, your spoken language is very important because you would need to communicate with the nurses, with the doctors, maybe with the patients, if some of them are not first language speakers of Arabic. But is that enough? Of course not. From my experience, and I'm sure that my colleagues who have taught medical students before, they usually struggle when they go to practice, to do their internship in the hospitals. They struggle more with writing. And if you don't work in improving their writing when they are still in college, believe me, nobody will teach them when they go to the hospital. Because when you go to the hospital, they will expect you to be able to write a report. Imagine if your language as a doctor is really bad, you're not able to write a grammatically correct report, then it means that you'll be in the back. And not to mention that you might be, just somebody from a higher authority might say that you are not suitable for this hospital. I know that big hospitals here in Saudi, like big names, if you want to go and do your internship there, you will need your English to be good. So this is, by the way, one way to motivate our learners when we teach ESP in college level. They need to understand from day one that whatever they are learning here in college, in the first year of college, is something that they are going to need when they go to the hospital or go to the bank or go to the factory. This link is important because once the link is made, then the motivation is there. If the link is not made, then the student will be lost. So I think all the 4 skills are important in ESP, at least in my opinion.
We have another question from Mr. Ibrahim. He says, essential method to teach beginners English by teaching them from whole to part. I used this method before and it was successful and useful. So the question, is there any method instead of this method that he has been
Whole
using.
body.
Mhm.
The whole body. Yes. I think when we talk about language teaching, we know that we have so many approaches. So we have the bottom up. So you would start, for example, with understanding the reading passage, and then you look at the details. Or the other way around, you look at the details and the vocabulary, and then you start looking at the whole picture. So both approaches are possible. And if you ask me, those different approaches don't apply to each and every class. There is no perfect way to teach language. It's your job as a teacher to find the way that is most suitable for your learners. As my supervisor, my PhD supervisor used to say that for most questions in applied linguistics, the answer is, it depends. It depends on the level of the students. It depends on the age of the students. It depends on the amount of exposure that they have outside the classroom. It depends on their interest. It depends on what you have mastered as a teacher. So it depends on so many things. So my take on this is that there is no perfect way. As a teacher, like when I started teaching English a few years ago, I started, experimenting with things. Okay, grammar translation, deductive approach, inductive approach, teaching the reading passage, general comprehension before looking at the details, or the other way around. All of these are possibilities, and in my opinion, they make your basket as a teacher rich. Your job as a teacher is to evaluate the context where you are teaching and choose the one that is most suitable for that context.
Thank you so much, Dr. Suhad. We have many other interesting questions, but we apologize. We can't take any more questions because that's the end of the first workshop. Thank you again, Dr. Suhad, for such an interesting topic. And I really do encourage language educators to stimulate students' engagement in extramural English activities, as this engagement might resolve some of the limitations of the classroom-based formal English learning, like the time constraints.